Like, what is the landscape? What is happening? Sort of where do things stand in New Orleans, in Louisiana, and across the Gulf Coast? I'm going to invite our panelists up to the stage as we get settled here. I believe, I was going to say, our moderator's in the audience listening. No, she's right here by the stage. We've got a fantastic group. Let's welcome them up to the stage, and we'll keep this morning rolling. Thank you so much. Yeah. 1, 2, 3. I think if you use those mics that are there. Okay. Great. I'll give you this one.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, wherever you want to sit. Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Hello? Okay, there you go. Awesome. Well, that was an invigorating conversation and really empowered us to think more about how we can collaborate together between different groups. And I think that's also the theme of this panel going forward. So we're here to talk about the state of the transition, and in particular with a lens on policy. So we'll be diving in onto topics related to how we can use the federal dollars that Mary talked about a little bit better, and how we can actually administer that here in Louisiana. So we have 3 very distinguished and awesome panelists here today, and I might ask if each of you could to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So my name is Greg Upton. Can you hear me? No. There we go. Sounds good. My name is Greg Upton. I'm the Interim Executive Director of the Center for Energy Studies at Louisiana State University. The center was actually created by the legislature in the early 1980s, back when over 40% of the state's revenues came directly from oil and gas. And so as you can imagine, different groups were coming to the legislature saying different things. And at some point they said, you know, we just don't know what to believe. So they created the center. They house it at LSU to give the academic protection. And what we do is we research what happens at the intersection of the energy sector in Louisiana, the economy, and the environment, and then we communicate that to the legislature as well as the general public. So that is what the center is, and that's what we do to this day.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Josh Flegg. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at GNO Inc., Greater New Orleans Inc. So GNO Inc. is the regional economic development organization focused on supporting business and investment from the business community and creating jobs in the Greater New Orleans area, so the 10-parish area around New Orleans. I run the business development team, so we focus on attracting industry to Louisiana, to our region in Greater New Orleans, and also helping our existing businesses expand and stay here and grow and thrive in the Greater New Orleans area.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shafeen Khan. I'm the VP of External Affairs and Innovation at the UNO Research and Technology Foundation, also known as the Beach. So we work very closely with the University of New Orleans and their expertise in offshore energy, and so have built the Louisiana Wind Energy Hub at UNO that leverages the engineering expertise, the environmental sciences expertise, as well as the business expertise over at UNO. So supporting research, supporting innovation, and doing workforce training. Happy to be here with this great panel.
So the standpoint I come from is from looking at the climate tech landscape as a whole and how to finance the actual scale up of climate tech. So I have a blog called eTech Monkey. And one of the articles I did was looking at how emissions is distributed across different areas. And what was enlightening to me is that, you know, if you look at the pie of emissions distributed across different, I guess, life use cases, you have a third that's dedicated to making stuff, so industrial production, manufacturing. You have another third that's electricity production, and then that last third is actually split between transport and food and ag. And what's been interesting to me to observe is that if you look at where the focus of climate tech has been, it's been around transport, it's been around food and ag, and it's been around energy, around electricity production. But that last third, the industrial side of things, really hasn't gotten a good look and a good set of technologies and a good set of investment dollars dedicated to it until the IRA. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit about what is Louisiana doing, and maybe the broader Gulf Coast doing, right now when it comes to dedicating these dollars over to this industrial wedge. And then I also want to talk a little bit about like the other sort of wedges too, like when you're talking about transport, when you're talking about electricity production and food and ag, those all can be very inward-facing initiatives, decarbonizing Louisiana and what's happening to the people inside the state. And then on the industrial side, it can be very outward-facing, decarbonizing the industries that are affected by Louisiana or that use products from Louisiana. So I guess with that kind of context around the emissions picture and then more broadly like inward-facing or outward-facing, what is Louisiana doing well between all of those things and what could be done better? So anyone want to start that?
Sure, yeah. So I think the biggest factor that we need to think about in Louisiana is that we are a net exporter of very carbon-intensive products. So that includes liquid fuels such as gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, but it also includes fertilizers, chemicals, plastics, all of these products that even in a decarbonized world we're really going to need. And so the question that companies are asking themselves and that I talk to every day is they say, you know, the world is telling us that they want to decarbonize these value chains, and we know how to do it. We can reduce our carbon emissions, and we're actually very competitive right now internationally in our carbon intensity of these products. But the question for us is whether that global marketplace is going to pay that premium for those carbon-reduced products. And that, to me, is the big economic question that companies are asking right now. I can make an investment today, whether that's electrification, whether that's efficiencies, whether that's carbon capture, whether that's move to hydrogen for combustion, all these different technologies that we can talk about. But these things cost more than the current state of affairs. And we're happy to make those investments, but the question is whether the global marketplace is gonna pay that premium. A few weeks ago, I was in Saudi Arabia. It was kind of interesting. And the conversation that was happening was exactly this. Think about that for a minute. Another big exporting part of the world that exports all of these products. And these exporting parts of the world are all thinking about this simultaneously and trying to think about what is their competitiveness going to be relative to their competitors in the future, and whether or not indeed that market's going to pay that premium for that lower carbon product.
Yeah, so what I heard was that Louisiana is, in your mind, a net exporter of these technologies. It's much more outward-facing innovation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Josh?
Yeah, we're can you hear me okay? We're the production hub, right? And so I'll give you some stats to sort of help put into context where we are. And I feel very much that we're in the first inning of this transition in Louisiana. So I joined GNO Inc. June of last year. And I inherited a sales pipeline. My group we're sales folks, right? We're trying to attract projects that will invest in our region and create jobs in our region. And so I inherited a pipeline, and this is across most of our sectors, right? Whether it's the energy landscape, the software landscape, but it was a pipeline of about $5 billion in investment and about 4,500 jobs. And these are projects that, most of these are not going to materialize, but if we close 10%, that's a really good, kind of close rate. Without trying, that has ballooned into $15 billion and about 10,000 jobs with being completely reactive. And the majority of what's driving that are cleaner energy projects up and down the river parishes. Some of these were pushed to us immediately after the IRA passed, whether it's battery-related projects, kind of upstream, right, kind of refining some of these different minerals related to EV production, whether it's biofuels, whether it's ammonia being driven by the war in Ukraine. But the pipeline just went in what is relatively overnight, right? It took years to build the $5 billion pipeline, and we went from 5 to 15 in a very short time frame, which is amazing. The capital investment is tremendous. The job count is tremendous. What concerns me a little bit, though, is how do we capture the knowledge base and the innovation part of this investment, right? So Louisiana is an amazing production hub, right? We can fabricate amazing things here. Every chemical you can imagine. We're really good at making big, heavy metal things, bringing them out into deep waters, turning them upright, making them run. So I'm confident we can be a hub for wind. But how do we drive more white-collar innovation jobs as well, right? That create and make these investment decisions as well. So we want to be the production hub. We absolutely want to be the production hub for this newer, cleaner energy. But how do we capture the professional jobs that are part of that as well? And so that's the piece where we have to get creative to help build and help attract those jobs as well.
Yeah, and we'll dig into some of the obstacles a little bit later on. But I guess, Shafin, in your mind, what's the innovation you've observed around Louisiana, and how is it distributed across the categories that I mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about just wind, and Josh, I mean, that's such a great point, right? Thinking of how to actually bring those innovation jobs, those business jobs here is really going to be critical. On the wind front, one of the things that we always kind of talk about is that the first offshore wind farm in the U.S., off of the coast of Rhode Island, the Block Island Wind Farm, there were 8 Louisiana companies that were involved in the design, the manufacture, the construction, and the servicing of that wind farm. 8 Louisiana companies, right? And so that's tremendous expertise and knowledge and know-how that we have down here. And our role at the Wind Hub really is how do we take that knowledge, that know-how, and turn it into new entrepreneurial ventures? This is an entrepreneurship conference, right? Talking about that. How do we get some of the oil and gas expertise that has translated into those jobs to spin out new technologies, new products that can have that global impact, right? And so you think about offshore wind in the Gulf, and you think about hurricanes and other challenges that we have. There are companies in the region that are looking to address those challenges, and those are new innovations that are going to really set the gold standard for the technology for wind turbines moving forward. So I think that's a great opportunity for us to build off of.
Yeah, and so, we have this advantage position. Louisiana has this advantage position along the Gulf Coast where it's very natural to be siting offshore wind projects and other offshore projects here. Also, Louisiana is a big manufacturing hub and has the ability to produce products at scale, which not a lot of regions around the U.S. Have the talent and the capabilities and the manufacturing facilities to do. So how do we actually make this happen? So Josh, you mentioned that there's a ton of projects in the pipeline right now as a result of IRA. There's a workforce problem as well. But how do we actually get the dollars deployed? And part of what I think is an issue, and I'd be curious if you agree or if there are other issues we should be talking about, is that there's a lot of projects, they're not crossing the finish line fast enough because permitting and like some of the other administrative parts of getting these projects moving forward is still not being addressed properly, even with legislation. So I'm kind of curious as to if you agree with that, and then also if there are state level or city level initiatives that are addressing any of these problems, permitting or otherwise.
Yeah, so the biggest permitting obstacle right now in Louisiana, and this might be getting too much into the weeds, but it's called the Industrial Tax Exemption Program. So in Louisiana, the state is not allowed to assess a property tax via the Constitution, but the localities are not allowed to assess an income tax, so it's kind of a trade-off. But when it comes to property tax, when you have a large industrial manufacturing-oriented project, the state historically has given the property tax exemption. And this was very controversial, right? If you're the local government, you're saying, hey, look, this is our tax base. Why don't we have this decision? So when the new governor came in, John Bell Edwards, 8 years ago, he made a change to this. He said, first of all, you don't get 100% exemption for 10 years as it was before. You're going to get an 80% exemption. And the local governments now have to sign off on it. So this was kind of a trade-off again, right? I think the 80-20 split was actually kind of supported by industry. I think industry came in and said, hey, look, we need to give something to the localities. But it's also created this big permitting issue now, where now you have to go to 3 local entities within the parish and get all 3 of those to sign off. So now imagine you're on this multi-billion-dollar project for many, many, many years, and I can tell you, I've run the economics on these projects. These exemptions are big, big, big dollars, and this has really kind of slowed that process. So that's actually one of the big issues right now in the governor's race that's currently happening, that's being debated right now. The other thing I'll say on this very quickly is that, you know, you want to have permitting, you want it to be a straightforward process, and I get that. And this is not just for decarbonization, this is for whatever investments you're talking about. But you also want to be respectful to these local communities. You truly do. And so there is a balance. There legitimately is. We need to go into these communities. We need to understand what are the issues that you actually have with these projects, and you need to give people the opportunity to do that. And so I know there's this, you know, let's push, let's do permitting reform, let's get this stuff in the ground, let's make it happen, and let's, you know, decarbonize the global economy. And I get that, that's exciting, but there's a flip side to that too, which is we do need to understand and respect these local communities that have been here for centuries, and striking that balance is legitimately a challenge.
Yeah, so I will completely second your ITEP feedback. I spent 10 years with LED prior to this role, and so I've been through the ITEP ups and downs of the Jindal administration and the Edwards administration. And I think no one would philosophically debate the fact that locals should have some say in what taxes they abate. That's a wholly good thing. You know, the challenge is just the predictability of now you're dealing with 64 different countries, right? Effectively, who have very different processes across those 64 different little countries, right? And how they do it. And so what happens is some of these big projects get bogged down into these hyper local problems dealing with one school board person in one parish, and they're like, to hell with it, I'm going to Texas, right? And so let's just make it easier and make it more predictable and make it standardized. Absolutely, locals should have some say in what, you know, taxes they abate and how that impacts their schools and all that kind of stuff. But it needs to be predictable and it needs to be easy and plug and play. Because at some point, you know, businesses, I don't care if they're sinking $3 billion into the ground in a parish, they're going to give up at some point and go somewhere else, right? Just because it's easier for them to be there. So I think we need to continue to refine these challenges, you know, with ITEP. I think there will be some attempt to do that. I'm assuming under the next administration, we'll see. I think, you know, I do think absolutely engaging the locals very early on to make sure that they understand what's actually being built or permitted in their parish is a very, very, very big deal. Because there's a lot of misinformation on what some of these projects are about, right? There's a lot of misinformation down at the grassroots level about, you know, clean energy or energy transformation. There's this real weird fallacy out there, this false choice, right? That oh, well, if we're going to, you know, permit and light this new opportunity up in our parish, it's going to take away our oil and gas jobs potentially, or whatever that looks like. And it's all net. We see this as all net new, right? This is about sinking new investment and creating new jobs in addition to. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done at the local level there as well. So cleaning up ITEP and the process is a super important thing that I think that we can do, and then working at a very deep grassroots level in the trenches with locals to understand the opportunity is also key to growing and landing some of these large projects and inspiring confidence in these people that are going to sink billions of dollars into these communities. They need to feel like they're welcome and the process makes sense and it's easy.
Yeah, I'll third everything that's been said. I mean, engaging the communities really is key here, right? I mean, whether it's the coastal communities that are so fragile these days, whether it's the environmental groups, the shipping and the fishing industries, right, especially on the wind side, right, having those conversations, making sure those groups are engaged. Because if they aren't, what will happen is there'll be disputes that will delay the development, and that could, in many cases, jeopardize financing for these projects. So making sure that they're engaged, making sure that there's clarity in terms of the process for those groups is going to be critical.
Yeah, I see kind of when we're talking about here, this permitting problem as a little bit of a collaboration between the community and the project developer and the sponsors and whoever else is on the project on actually making sure that this project can actually be a beneficial development for the region. And I think that also transitions well into other types of collaborations that present potentially obstacles or that can potentially accelerate the development of these projects. In particular, I think one of the things I've heard is that in getting these projects from ideation to actual execution, you need off-takers, and you need people actually buying the products, and you need sponsors as well. So how do we create that kind of industrial collaboration between folks? And Shafin, I might ask you to comment on that because of the beach and what you're doing for that community. But how do we, from a state level, and then also from a city level, and from a region level, how do we foster that collaboration between the industrial side, the public side, and then also the community side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's very similar, right? It's engaging them early in the process, right? So on our side, because of the strength we have in engineering in our university, we do a lot of work with the industry partners to build new technologies and new innovations that can enable the development of offshore wind in the community. But we're also engaging, policymakers and other developers as well through our business school and a partnership we have with GNO Inc. called H to the Future, the Nexus project that I'll let Josh talk a little bit more about. But there's a variety of ways that we need to make sure that we're engaging with those groups because, as you said, even groups like the Public Service Commission, Entergy, who's the energy provider here, they need to be engaged in the discussion. And in fact, they just had an announcement this morning that they're put together a memorandum of understanding with RWE, which is the second largest wind energy company in the world. So that's really exciting to see that there's been developments on that front.
Yes, thanks, Shafin. H to the Future is our answer, right? So we won a large federal grant last year through the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. It was $50 million from the feds, matched with $25 million from the state. It's called H to the Future, and ostensibly the goal is to create a few different work streams that are going to help us fabricate a cleaner hydrogen. Core to that concept is, can we have some windmills in the Gulf turn an electrolyzer that will then break seawater into cleaner hydrogen? 30% of the buyers of industrial hydrogen in the country are between the 70-mile stretch of river between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. We have the off-takers here, right? We have the buyers here. We have the pipeline infrastructure. So, a lot of what I've spent my career on has been knocking on the doors of software companies that are like, what? Louisiana? No, get out of here, right? So it's not the case in this world, right? We have that industrial base. It exists. The infrastructure exists. The off-takers exist. And so through this program, part of what we're using those dollars on is to build an industry council of those players. On the buy side, the big industrial guys, the off-takers, everyone who is part of this potential cleaner energy revolution. It's not just about clean hydrogen. That was the gateway, but we're building a future energy council that will be the big players, some of the small guys, and then the goal will also to be to have a subset of that, which is more innovation focused, helping some of these startups sell into the big players, right, and to commercialize their technology as well.
Yeah, I'll kind of come back full circle to what Senator Landrieu talked about and what I had alluded to at the very beginning, which is we want to decarbonize this global value chain, right? So what do you think has happened to energy demand here in the United States over the last decade? What does everyone think? You think it's gone up, down, stayed the same? It's been completely flat, okay? Why has this been the case? So I know we're running out of time here, but so we just had our third child, and my wife says, all right, Greg, we need to get that big 3-row SUV, right? We went from the 2-row RAV4 to the 3-row Highlander. What do you think that the fuel economy is of the Highlander today versus her RAV from 2010 when we got married? It's actually 1 mile per gallon better, okay? The same year, our dishwasher, our washer, and our dryer all go out. I was very lucky this year. Super lucky, right? Okay. What do you think our energy usage is today relative to before we got these new appliances? It's a little bit lower, right? Now, would I go buy a new car and new appliances in order to reduce my energy usage? Absolutely not. From an economic standpoint, it doesn't make sense. But over time, what we've seen in the developed world is energy demand growth has not happened. Same thing in Western Europe. The demand growth that we are meeting today in the Gulf Coast region is Asia, China, India, the developing world, where you have hundreds of millions of people getting access to electricity for the first time, getting access to transportation for the first time. And ultimately, it is going to be those markets that drive and tell us, are they willing to pay a little bit more to have these lower carbon products? And if the answer to that is yes, then I think we'll be able to, the economics will be there and we'll be able to drive that to be able to supply that to the global market that's being demanded. And so that to me is the big question for us here, looking forward in our decarbonization
Is
effort.
whether there will be consumers paying the green premium for these products?
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, well, we're out of time. I hope this has been an enlightening discussion on kind of some of the actual initiatives on the ground to help unlock those IRA and infrastructure dollars and also to help incentivize innovation here in Louisiana. Thank you to our distinguished panelists, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.